Hello, my name is Tolg and I exist, therefore I think too much. I just read it and now I don't know it. Beep! This is part 5 of the introduction to Marguerite Poret's Mirror of Simple Souls. Again, the reason I am rereading the introduction so late into the book is because, I got to a point in which I got confused and couldn't swear by what it was I was saying. And while I was checked, I figured I may as well go check the, professionals' take on it. So we left off on one of Marguerite's writings. And she is in trial. She had just been tried by the Pope or the papacy, and now she is being tried by canonists? I can't remember. And then it leaves off and defining that she was not necessarily a true beguine, but a beguine probably by the definition of she roughly aspires to spirituality, and so more than likely she is considered a beguine, not because she participated in the communities or in the convents, but because she was a heretic against the church under the guise of spirituality. So it references one of her works, "Oh my lover, what will beguines say?" and religious types when they hear the excellence of your divine song. Her lover is a god. Beguines say, I err. Priests, clerics, and preachers, Augustinians, Carmelites, and the friars minor, because I wrote about the being of the one purified by love. The being that is purified by love is the... I don't want to wear my glasses. I'm not going to wear my glasses. I have to push them up my face all the damn time. It's annoying. Slightly blurrier, but it's okay. I don't even remember what I was saying, so I'm gonna start reading. Oh yeah, I cuss. If you don't like cussing, you can go away. No one asked you to be here. You were here because you wanted to be. Marguerite refers to beguines as opponents. Odd. Perhaps because by beguines she meant the so-called true beguines, who had consented to the official statutes requiring moderate enclosure regulations. So, being ruled over essentially. So, opponents because she is anti-system. She is punk. A second reason for her death may have been the fact that she wrote her book in vernacular French, a factor which church leadership in France had already found to be disquieting. I wonder why. I wonder if they go into that. The Chronicle of Jean de Outremus. I am so bad at French. La Mirreur des Histoires. The History of Mirrors? I mean, that would... maybe, hopefully, give reason as to why this is called the Mirror of Simple Souls, because I have wondered that for a while now. Includes a note about Marguerite Porete to the effect that she had translated the Holy Scriptures. Wow, she really, really learned. Expressed errors against the Articles of Faith and against the Eucharist. I'd have to understand the Eucharist a little bit more. As far as I understand, the Eucharist is just, this is the representation of the body of Christ, a holy wafer. But this makes it seem like it's a whole regiment, like the act as well as the thing itself. While there is no evidence of Marguerite's having translated scripture, oh no, her vernacular treatise contains clear scriptural references. So, is this to insinuate that the only people that could handle or speak of scripture are those that were okayed by the church to do so, granted permission by the church to do so. Everyone else just had to follow along. A third threat to the established order may relate to her book's popularity and notoriety. It is likely that Marguerite did not submit to Guy's episcopal condemnation, and that she kept the mirror in her possession. She may have taken confidence in the prior approval by such a renowned theologian as Godfrey of Fontaines. She was accused of distributing copies of her work. Perhaps her writing had already enjoyed a certain popularity. It was highly unlikely that she could have removed a text which was already in people's possession. Moreover, her silence throughout the whole trial period, her refusal to explain or elaborate anything, shows clearly that she had no wish to deny her teachings. Duh. I guess they assumed most people are full of shit. That's wild. That people just get to a point in life where they expect people to not stand by what it is they say. Man, that's gotta suck. Talk about a lack of trust. That Marguerite's book may have been popular is borne out by the manuscript evidence. While the original text is no longer extant? There are presumably 3 copies in Old French, though only one is accessible. Who has the other 2? Is it the church? There were many translations, 4 Latin, 2 Italian, and 3 Middle English. I guess it's, 1300s, so Middle English makes sense. Of the Italian translations, it is possible that 36 copies were circulating in the 15th century. The 3 Middle English translations are 15th century manuscripts and were probably done by Carthusians. A Carthusian monk, Richard Methley, unfortunate last name, 1451 to 1528, translated the text from Middle English to Latin. The Bishop of Cambrai did not burn the only existing book. Should he be burned then? Because that's what Marguerite was burned because of. Or was that to set an example? In fact, his warning to Marguerite could indicate that he knew there were additional copies, and the details of the report of the second consultation indicate that the book was in the possession of many, quote, simple persons, beggars, and others, unquote. If so, both the burning of the book and Marguerite's condemnation to the flames could be interpreted as a symbolic public warning against theological views which were becoming widespread. The church's vie for power. Absolute power and unquestioned power. Such views, understood to be antinomian, would be in official eyes a threat to the order that both the crown and the French ecclesiastical leadership had worked together to establish. The historical setting of Marguerite Poret's The Mirror of Simple Souls is the maelstrom of political and ecclesiastical tensions and conflicts, having told as much as possible of the story of these women called Béguines, as well as the possible circumstances surrounding the death of our intrepid French Béguine Marguerite Porete. We are now ready to undertake a theological analysis of the mirror itself. Jesus Christ, it took so long to get there. Oh, okay, so this is the beginning of the part in which I am actually mad about. The rest of it does well to explain where Marguerite was and what gave birth to Marguerite and how she was. This part is... Who wrote the introduction? Translated and introduced by Ellen L. Babinski. So the introduction, this is the interpretation of Ellen of what the whole book means. I don't think I agree with Ellen on a large part of things, so should I end it here Or are you up for me arguing? It's been 10 minutes, holy shit. Okay, so you're gonna hear me argue. Maybe, probably, I don't know. We'll see. So, introduction, Marguerite on the nature of the soul and its spiritual progress. The Mirror of Simple Souls would be correctly viewed as both a treatise and a kind of handbook designed to assist believers with their spiritual quest. As a treatise, the Mirror is written in the format of a dialogue in the Bethian tradition among the allegorical figures of reason, love, and the soul. These figures debate with one another about the proper relation of the human and the divine and how this relation allows the spiritual ascent of the soul to God. Oh, that is not what it allows. If it were the spiritual ascent of the soul to God, then surely the soul would have already ascended and not existed on this plane, in that God exists through the person, fills the person like a glove, and the soul exists in a portion of the body, then the soul has not ascended, neither spiritually, nor physically, nor metaphorically. The soul has stunted and stalled. The discourses, along with poetry interspersed among the arguments of the debates, are articulated by means of expressions from the French courtly tradition. Oh, interesting. The Mirror is also a spiritual handbook in that it helps believers discern what is necessary to live a spiritually successful life. Subjective. With Marguerite Porete's Mirror, we find a daring attempt by a Beguine author to penetrate the relation of the discursive and effective capacities of the soul in her portrayal of the nature of the soul and her outline of spiritual progress. Oh, if that's an outline, that's a sad, sordid version of one. I barely went to college, but I went to college enough to understand that that's a shitty version of an outline. Kind of haphazard and all over the place. Her views about how these relations affect transformation and union of the soul with God will be given our attention below. Oh, goody. First, we shall examine what, from Marguerite, is the nature of spiritual progress by reviewing the 7 stages she uses to sketch this itinerary. In order to comprehend this itinerary fully, 2 other critical factors, namely her notions of 3 deaths and 2 kinds of souls, must also be considered. 2 kinds of souls. Ooh. I guess, most people just debate whether a soul exists or doesn't exist. To debate further into the soul of what type of soul it is more than most people ever get to. So commendable in that respect. This examination will set the framework within which her view of the nature of the soul is to be understood. Such an analysis will show... What will it show? That Marguerite makes important distinctions in a faculty psychology. Is this considered psychology? Which enable her to delineate the relation of love and knowledge in the spiritual progress of the soul, since the soul received the image of the Trinity at creation. That's interesting. The image. The soul only received the image of it? Not the practice of it? Or creation, too. The Trinity didn't exist at the point of humanity's creation. So is it the creation of the soul itself and not the human creation entirely? I would assume so. But the image is still weird. Wouldn't you say the understanding of the Trinity? I don't know, that confuses me a bit. We must grasp the Beguine's understanding of the 3 persons in order to comprehend her teaching on how the distinctions among the faculties of the soul form the image of the Trinity. Oh, interesting. In this way, we shall see how the relation of love and knowledge within the faculties is the means by which the soul can make spiritual progress toward the divine life. We begin with a brief overview of Marguerite's outline of the 7 stages of the process of ascent. This will help us to analyze 2 important components of spiritual progress, namely 3 kinds of death and 2 kinds of souls. Only 3 kinds of death. Marguerite's distinction between desirous love and fine amour, or divine love. How is that what that is especially important for understanding her outline, since divine love does not act directly upon the soul until the transition from the 4th stage to the 5th. Okay, so I have already gone through chapters 1 through 30, at the very least. 32 at the most. I did just look. So, having said that, how in the absolute fuck did Ellen, writing the introduction, understand which stage it was going through? Because she has not marked whether it be the 4th, the 3rd, the 5th stage. We're just following along through something that's really poorly organized. Unless Ellen did a shit job at translating this and omitted certain parts that would have, maybe not having done a shit job, but certain things did not exactly translate through the literal translation and were therein left out. Who in the hell has been able to denote different stages in this? Certainly she has marked 2 different points in which, she designated participating in the virtues. But otherwise, stages were not necessarily set apart. In the 1st stage, the soul is touched by grace, stripped of her capacity for mortal sin, and commanded by God to love him with all her heart and her neighbor as herself. Well, everyone's told to do that, but I guess that would be the 1st stage. The soul moves to the 2nd stage when she abandons self in the mortification of nature to accomplish the counsels of evangelical perfection. Counsels. So the counsels would be the 10 virtues? I assume. Teaching one how to be perfect, not yet being perfect. The 3rd stage is marked by an abundance of love for the works of perfection, which sharpens the spirit of the soul and boils up in her, creating a desire to multiply her good works. Since what is most prized in love is to offer what is most loved. The soul sacrifices her good works, which she loves, pulverizing her spirit, and beating and bruising herself, in order to enlarge the place where her love would want to be. There's a movie. Carrie. Is that what the movie is called? Or is that just the main character of the movie? Where she's like telekinetic and she has to flog herself. That's what this reminds me of. And I know there are people that find it, sacrilegious to speak ill of anybody's belief systems. However, there are a few that I absolutely will fucking shit on, and one of them is the Catholic belief, not all Catholicism, but some sections of Catholicism, belief that pain brings you closer to the death of Jesus, and through pain you will understand Jesus better and therein ascend past your humanity. Jesus's role, according to Christianity, Jesus's role was to die on the cross. Your role, according to Christianity and absolutely from the mouth of Jesus, was to attempt to be like God, not be like Jesus. So why in the fuck are you trying to cause yourself pain? It does not adhere to Christianity. Also, the part where it says, in order to enlarge the place where her love would want to be, is weird. It's really weird. This indicates a prior knowledge that beating something makes large something else. It's not a good look. She relinquishes the works which give her such delight, and she submits in obedience to the will of another, all in the effort to put the will to death. Yeah. The point seems to be that the submission of the soul to another and the desired destruction of the will is accomplished by the strength of the soul's will, so that the soul's own love is enlarged. Oh, that's a very delightful way of looking at it. You know, subjective perspective says a lot for how one walks away from whichever teaching is actually being taught. That's why I do apologize for in case I am projecting myself and my own knowledge onto the situation. This person has walked away from it thinking that it is the soul that beats the physicality into submission. And the bruising is metaphysical, I presume. It's a lot more forgiving than the actual picture of it, even if it still sounds weird. The contradictory nature of this statement. Ooh, contradictory. I don't think it contradicts anything. It is exactly as it says it is. Indicates that the soul is still willing with her own will. I see the contradiction. If her will aligns with the soul's will, then the soul acting on its will is still acting on her will, in that it is the same thing, one and the same subject. Okie dokie. I mean, you know, going through the book rather than the introduction. I've said it before, it's rather cyclical and redundant. Like it sends you through I want to use the word maelstrom without knowing the exact definition. Sends you through a fuck storm of confusion only to end on something that makes sense. So it's cyclical but linear all the same. Like starts on a line, then goes through a weird, you know, cyclical pattern, and then ends on the same line it started on. Hyper defensive. In the fourth stage, the soul is consumed in an ecstasy of love in which she is deceived into thinking that God has no greater gift in store for her. But divine love carries her higher, outside herself. At the fifth stage, the soul ponders interiorly two considerations. I defined 2 souls and 3 kinds of death. Now the editor is lost as well, because the editor laid that out as though that was something to be addressed and has not addressed it. That God is who is, from whom everything is, and that she is not, from whom no thing is. Well, I agree with the foremost part of that, and then the latter part of that doesn't make sense. I mean, everything needs a balance, but just because something exists doesn't mean that you don't exist, simply in need of a balance, unless you've promoted yourself to extreme importance, and you are the balance to God therein. That's significant. She sees that free will has been placed in her from the being of God who is being, capitalized, so the being in and of itself, and that the will ought to be from the being of God who is being. Oh no, I just repeated the beginning of this. Whoopsie daisy. And that the will ought to be placed in its source. Well, I mean, I may as well have said the same thing that I prior said. Thus the will departs from its own will, and renders itself back to God, without retaining anything of its own. The will which gave her the feeling of love in the fourth stage of contemplation has departed from her. Oh no, now she doesn't get to feel love. So then moving forward into the sixth stage, the soul no longer sees herself because of the abyss of humility into which she has fallen. Interesting. Neither does she see God. Ooh, I don't think humility should make you blind to everything that is. Because of his highest goodness. Instead, God sees himself in her by his divine majesty, which makes the soul transparent. part of metaphysicality that no one would be able to deny or support. Because it's an extreme claim. Okay, and then moving on to the 7th stage. So the 6th stage, she's just an X-ray fish. The 7th stage cannot be described. Oh no. And it will be known only when the soul has left the body. Is that healthy? I don't know. There are 2 critical ingredients within the framework of these stages of spiritual progress. One is Marguerite's description of the 3 kinds of death. Hey, it's being addressed along the path. The other is her distinction between the 2 kinds of souls who practice the virtues in the 2nd stage. 3 transitions or quote-unquote deaths, which give birth successively to 3 higher kinds of life. That sounds like reincarnation. Move the soul towards spiritual perfection. Okie dokie. That's just a claim. Marguerite calls these deaths death to sin, death to nature, and death to the spirit. Okay, that doesn't make it a different kind of death. That's the same kind of death, just in different situations. The first death, to mortal sin, births the life of grace in the 1st stage. At the 1st stage, one begins with the commandments of the Church in the help of God, who commands that one love him with all one's heart, soul, and virtue, loving self as one ought and neighbor as self, all of which is necessary for salvation. You know, that is, how do I put that? That is a specificity that I don't think modern day churches actually pay attention to, especially when the argument is made against modern day religion that says love your neighbor as yourself. Most people don't start with love yourself as you're supposed to, and then love others as you love yourself. Most people don't even include loving yourself. And that has been, my issue with saying love your neighbor as you love yourself, because a lot of modern day society doesn't love themselves. Not true love. There's lust and ownership. And that may be the base of everything that's gone wrong. Everybody's been told the golden rule, treat others as you would treat yourself, and how many people treat themselves well? The life of grace is the life of ordinary believers. Interesting. Grace, as I understand it, is kind of, if not entirely, synonymous with forgiveness. Being allowing, and therein understanding. So only ordinary believers are allowed to be allowing and understanding. Everyone else has to shut the fuck up and follow. Compared to those who live the noble divine life, however, these folk are like peasants. Fuck them. They are coarse and without refined graces. They, therefore, are kept outside, apart from the noble ones and away from the secrets of the court of the Most High King. I would want to know. I'm going to end it there. Hold on. So being raised in non-denominational Christianity, they say, that the point is to have a relationship with God. That's the whole point of the religion in entirety of Christianity, is to have a relationship with God. And that, Christ and Mary and all of these figures, saints and whatnot, are the intermediaries between you and God, and that also defines the relationship you have with God. And so being allowed into the inner court and therein the secrets of God, sure, fine and dandy and all, but personally, in having a relationship with anyone, I would want what they would want as well for the relationship. I don't want to step on... Oh, I kept the radio on and I didn't realize it. Oops. Enjoy some jazz if you can pick up on that. I wouldn't want to step on the expectations, and I am not fully socially aware all the time to, my detriment. And so normally I beg other people to let me know what the hell is happening and, the expectations for my person. And if there is to be expected that there's to be a relationship with God, I would want to know how much I am allowed. My immediate go-to is not how much can I get out of this. Maybe I'll learn secrets, but maybe I don't need to know those secrets, and maybe I don't want to know those secrets. Maybe it's above my pay grade. Maybe there's not enough in my life to account for knowing that. There's nothing I can answer for in relation to knowing that. I apply that to God, spirituality, and people in general. And I think that should be normal. I do value learning. I love the ability to learn. I think learning is the whole reason to be alive, but I don't think that sense of learning should somehow pester someone else's quality of life. Take away from someone else's quality of life. Ta-da. Okay, good night. Eat well, drink well, sleep well. Bye.